open the floor to questions.
Do you remember when we did Netflix? I can't find the information.
Yeah, the schedule spreadsheet is my go-to for that. It might be under Maxflix instead of Netflix.
I'm on it.
It looks like week 5, day 1 and 2. Don't ask me what we did on day 3 and 4 because those outlines are just completely empty.
So do you care if we go far back a little? Like I have a question. I'm still like playing with the weather app. So when we had the first use state with the weather data and you use the second one, I see you put an argument or a value inside the use state parameters, but the first one has nothing in there. So I'm trying to understand.
What did I put in the second one for the
The second
what
one
do
was
they
when we
call
did
that?
the dot map, so we can have the days render, and you deleted
I think you already had like some of the data in state so that like it has something to map over.
yeah.
But we were supposed to turn our like map over and create our own state. But I get what you're talking about, Schneider.
So my question is yeah, you had put a value in there, and like the first use state we had, you didn't put any value in. So I'm trying to figure out like
share your screen and we can go.
Yeah, that's a better idea.
I know what your question is, but it will help everyone get context into what we're talking about.
Yeah, good idea. See my screen?
I can.
Yeah, so over here, the value is nothing, but over here we have
okay. So this isn't use effect, this is use state. Sorry, I may have misheard you there. So whatever we put inside the parentheses as the first parameter will always be the initial value of the state. So basically what we wanted to do here is we said, hey, all of this weather data, we're going to start it out as empty because we don't know what it is. And we're going to handle that by, if you go down to the if statement before our return, we say if, too far. Stop there. Stop. There. Okay. Right here, we say if there's not weather data, show this return, give me a sec. Right? The reason why this if statement is true is because if you go back up to our use state, this started out as empty. So that's what's making our if statement run, because when there's no value in here, what weather gets set to is null.
Right.
However, down here, we did something different. We actually said, hey, start the data out with all 3 of these items in 5 objects that all equate out to this one big array. That one big array is getting set. So the first time this application loads, instead of it loading with the forecast data from our use effect down here, instead it's going to load with this data initially until the API call is done, and then it will update it.
And then this function right here, I can input different values and like update, it'll replace these.
You can. Whenever you use set, it always overrides whatever is currently in state.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's what I'm in the middle of doing. I just wasn't sure. I was a little confused.
Now you do want to
I just want to add, this might help you understand a little better, Schneider, is once you get the API working, you won't need anything in that state either. You can leave that state, if I'm not mistaken, you can leave that as an empty array, and then it'll function the same way as the weather data state does. It'll get filled in by the API and what you return from that.
So you could leave it as an empty array. You could not leave it as empty. And what I mean by that is the empty array, the brackets are still going to be in there, the square brackets, because if you delete that out entirely and you say, hey, don't wait for the API call, just go ahead and show this information. The dot map is going to run on empty, and it's going to be like, I don't care what I'm mapping over. It doesn't exist. I can't map over a null value. And so that's why we have to leave that empty array in there, as opposed to the other one we left completely empty, but we handled that differently, right? We handled that down in the if statement, and we said, hey, if it is empty, don't bother looking for any of the values inside of it, just put up your loading screen. So it really depends. That setup gives you a lot of flexibility. Do we want to show the user parts of the screen and say, hey, other parts of this are still loading? Or do we want to put in some kind of dummy data while the API is still loading so the screen doesn't change too much? Or there are lots of different options there, right? And so the combination of use state and use effect will give you control over what you want to show to the user while some data is coming in.
Thank you.
Great question. And to further hit that point home, if we want to go back to like the very first thing we did in React, we did a button and it says this button has been clicked 0 times. And every time we click that button, we said, hey, set counter to counter +1. And that was updating state and showing all of that information. But we had to put 0 in there somewhere, right? We needed to say, hey, start the counter at 0. And so that's why we put 0 in the state there. So that's where it started. That was the initial value of it. I'm going to quickly take attendance. And I'm waiving the cameras on rule for tonight. If you want to just put your head down and work on your capstone, that's totally fine. Reminder that we've got a capstone check-in coming up on Monday, where you're going to need to show off your what you have already. Screen share will be required. Even if you don't think it's a ton, just have something to show off. And that ideally should be in React. It should have at least 2 different routes in app.js. It should have the router installed. And you should have some content inside those components, right? Inside those routes. So if anyone needs help with that, just raise your hand. Like I said, we can go in a breakout room if you would prefer to do it like privately in a one-on-one. But totally up to you guys. I will be around for the next 2 hours and 15 minutes. So this is your time to make use of class time to make an impact on your capstone.
Hey, Max. Babe,
Yes.
would you mind muting that?
Huh?
Would you mind muting that? Thank you. So Monday, I'm not sure, but we might be on the flight. I know that there's Wi-Fi on the flight, so we'll be able to do it, but it might suck.
Yeah, don't hold your breath on that one.
Yeah, it's gonna suck. Yeah, you want to try that? Okay, whatever. Yeah, he wants to try that. Yeah, okay. I won't even be able to watch an episode of anything. But so Tuesday, if anything, would that be possible if we could present then, or maybe like if we are able to do the first half of class on Monday before we board the flight? Do you mind? Like, I'll let you know in advance. Maybe me and him can go first.
Yep, totally fine to go first there. And if not, you can either like record a little demo of like going through it in QuickTime and send that to me, or we can do it at the beginning of class Tuesday, or you can schedule a one-on-one with me and we can do it then.
Okay, we're both going to see if we can schedule one-on-ones while we're on the trip in Denver, because we're going to be there till Monday.
Perfect.
So do you have to put use state functions inside the use effect, or can you like create one outside of the use effect? Okay.
Your use state should be outside of the use effect when you're setting it up. You can call the values and set inside of a use effect, but the use state itself should be outside of the use effect so that you can access the scope of it when you return variables.
Okay.
And if you guys are sitting here being like, I know I have React questions, I don't know what questions I have to ask, go into Slack and take a look at any of those cheat sheets. Some of those cheat sheets, I'll just say, oh, don't worry about that. But if there's something where you're like, I feel like I covered this in class, but it's on this cheat sheet and I don't really get it, feel free to source any questions from there or from any previous homework assignments that you may still owe. And we can go all the way back to Max. I know we covered this in week 2, but I don't get what is this thing doing in HTML? That is a totally valid question. My 6th grade math teacher always had a whiteboard of what we were doing today, what the homework was, very similar to the daily outlines that we use. And once a month, he had an empty bottle of ketchup on a lanyard, and he'd just flip it over the board, and that would be the only thing on the board was this bottle of ketchup. And that was the ketchup day where nothing new was coming, and you could all kind of work together and catch up on assignments and make sure you were understanding it. So that's the inspiration for today.
Where's the ketchup?
Sorry, I should have just, maybe I'll make that my emoji. So when my camera's off, my profile picture has ketchup.
Let's do that.
Max, so with the URL links to covers or to pictures in SCSS, are they still
Yes.
the way as the in that file as it was in the CSS file?
So I'm really glad you asked that, because I want to show the whole class how we approach that. And then I will follow up and answer your question. So let me kick off. I'm going to just reuse our code from our portfolio. Give me 1 second to get this started. This is something that I meant to cover and totally forgot about, so I'm very glad you're asking. This one and this. Okay, so shrink some of this up. What we've got going on here is we've got our portfolio site. And we come down here and we've got, all the different sections. And then when we click onto another page, we've got some information going on here. So hypothetically, I'm going to go to my project page and I'm going to drop in a link tag, an href to Google for some reason. And I'm going to take that same A tag and I'm going to go into my home page and I'm going to drop that in right under the header. So now I've got my Google Me here. And if I go back to my home page, I also have my Google Me here. Now, okay, it's an A tag. We've seen A tags before, no big deal. I'm going to go into my CSS. And I'm in my CSS, and towards the top, I'm just going to say, hey, make an A tag the color purple. So just as expected, we get our purple here. But when we go into our project page, this is also purple. Okay, Well, that's kind of easy, right? We could go into our home and put an ID on this one that wasn't on the other one, and we could target it that way. But what if we have whole swaths of CSS, whole sections of CSS that we only want to apply to that component? Well, you think you could just go into your home folder and create home.css and put the CSS of the A tag into that own file. So if we do that, we go back to our home page. Okay, I don't have purple. Why don't I have purple? Because I have this CSS, but I never imported it anywhere. So if I go back to my home.js, I can import my home.css, just like we import pretty much anything. Now I've got my purple back, but when I move on to this page, I still have this purple. Well, that's annoying. We moved it into its own CSS file. And in fact, that's encouraged. If you have a component that has a lot of different styling in it, it's encouraged for you to make your own CSS file, because that way, when you're, changing something, it becomes much easier to find the CSS that applies for it. But that doesn't fix our problem. We want this home CSS to apply only to what is inside this home page. So in order to fix that, we use a different kind of CSS called Sass. And Sass is like CSS with superpowers. I was going to say CSS on steroids, but that's probably not as politically correct. So CSS with superpowers. And basically what it allows you to do is use a ton of features, just like React, right? There are times that we have features in React and we're like, man, wouldn't this be cool if we could do this in vanilla JavaScript? The same thing goes with Sass. Sass is a little bit harder to get set up in non-React projects, but in React projects, it's actually really, really easy. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go down back to my terminal, and I'm going to do an npm install Sass. And I'm going to remember to start my server back up. And now what that allows us to do is get Sassy in our CSS. So I'm going to come over to my home.css and rename that as home.scss, which is a file extension Sass uses. And now you notice how we got that little S showing up? VS Code has recognized that as Sass. However, we broke React over here because we're importing home.css, not SCSS. So I put my S in there, we're back to normal. But what this allows me to do is say, hey, go look for the ID of home. And when I'm in my home page, I want to make my A tag the color purple. I want to make every other font color green. And I want to make all of my images have a width of 3 pixels. None of this is getting applied, however, because we've got our home up here. So if I go back to my home, I need to add an ID onto my home. And now you see all of our styling changed. Everything that's inside the CSS is getting applied directly to anything that has the parent of home. But if I go to my portfolio page, you'll see my link colors are staying the same. So what Sass allowed us to do, basically, this is not valid CSS. You can't nest selectors in other selectors using CSS alone. So if we were to write this same thing in CSS, what we would have to do is say, hey, apply this to the A tag when the A tag also has home. And then we would have to come down and say, also apply this to any images, but only on home. And oh, the color also only should get applied on the home page. Now, obviously, that's quite verbose, right? That's saying we have to add home to every single tag. And so that's why we install Sass here and change the file extension. So we can use some format like this to say, hey, whatever is inside these curly braces should only get applied to the home page. Now, with all of that said, Alba, remind me of your question.
So I imported my Netflix, and in my I converted to the file to SCSS. I have a background image with an URL of an image /cover.jpg, and it's saying it can't resolve that.
Go ahead and share your screen. URLs in CSS get a little funky. And so try making it, put the img cover.jpg in quotes.
Inside the,
Yes. And then try throwing a slash at the beginning of it. Inside the quote. Yeah, right there.
I did bring in the images. It's in here in the public file, so I don't have to go a step further to add into the source file. Everything else imported fine, but for some reason it's having an issue with that image cover JPEG in the SAS file.
So this is a common problem when you use SAS with React. Wow. Didn't I resolve this with you before? I feel like this is I'm getting like deja vu on this.
Well, the first time you did do, you asked me to add SAS, and we did add SAS, and we had to change every single CSS file that I had for all of the projects and change them into SAS, because the graphics on one of them was going into the other CSS file. So all of them were getting merged together and nothing looked right.
Did I try this?
First image file. Maybe the dot in front of it?
I don't like the dot.
This says module not found, error cannot solve. Image /cover.jpg.
Oh, I don't like that solution. Hold on. See, the danger of allowing, the problem with allowing you guys to just ask questions is sometimes I won't know the answers to them. So it's got to be a relative pass.
I think the last one you told me to add 2 dots and it solved the problem, but I don't know why this one's not.
So this is in Aflix. We're going up one folder to source, then into public, then into IMG, then to cover. Okay, sorry. That was a tough one for me. So the answer is to use a relative path, which means, okay, start at wherever this Aflix file is at. And then we have to say, all right, we need to get up out of this source folder. So that's what the first double dot does. Then we say we need to go into public, then into image, and then go get the cover image from here.
All right, so my other question was, I already imported my weather and my feedback form, right?
Okay.
I was trying to put it goes into my weather app.
Nice.
And it goes into my feedback form.
Nice.
But I had to take out the code that you had that had the tildes. and just put a link to them, because any other thing that I tried to do to hook it for it to be able to get clicked into, it would not allow me with that on. It would go to project 0 / whatever I wanted to get into, and it will never show anything.
So did you move your weather app code and feedback form code into their own components?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Was not expecting that. When we built our initial portfolio site, instead of it taking you into the project itself, it took you into a page about the project.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with this approach. It's just very ambitious. However, that's not problematic. So let me see where it is breaking.
So I was in the, hold on, portfolio. I gotta get into the source home. So in the portfolio, you had something like this, but where the link was right here, where it said /project, $, and the curly braces to title. And it would create a separate page, which would be index, which would give you project 0, which was the first project. But whenever I add a link to that, it wouldn't allow me.
So let me take a quick look at your data. And we shouldn't be using the link here because we want it to be based off of project index.
That's what I was trying to do, but I couldn't link them with the project index in there. The only way that I was allowed to link them was allowing to link to the project itself.
So let me go app.js. You still have your project num in here. So we're going to go back to portfolio and adjust this to be /project /index.
Yeah.
And then now we want to say, okay, when we're in weather app and we click on it, we go to project 0. This is still weather app. And then this is feedback form. But what you're saying is you created separate pages for these. And so at this point, they probably should be their own routes. Right? Because whenever you create something that's supposed to be its entirely separate own page, we don't necessarily want to be pulling it from the data and dynamically generating it. It would be better to go ahead and put it in like this. So the way you did it is actually right. But that's a time where you've got to say, hey, do I have all of this data in one source that I want to dynamically load into a page? Or is the page that I'm going to entirely different based off of what project I'm clicking on? And because in your case, the answer is the latter, you should be using the link from the URL that you had set before.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I did it right, just because I tried everything. I tried adding plus link and I tried everything, but then it was sending me to project 0 / weather and it wouldn't show anything and it wouldn't allow me to do anything. So I just imported the projects themselves and created links for them to be able to link to the page itself.
Yeah, so you got to think through what you want to be happening there. The behavior change that you changed is you said, hey, I don't want this going to a reusable project page anymore. I want it to go to an entirely different separate page. And because that's the case, what you did in here is fine. However, you don't want to say, oh, just because I don't know how to do it this way and I know how to do it this way, I'm going to do that instead. Because that will get you in trouble in a team environment, but at the same time, you consciously said, hey, I want this to go to an entirely separate different page. And in that case, it's totally fine to do what you did.
Okay, because the only other thing I was thinking about is putting it in the project itself and then creating it in the project itself, but I wanted to go to the project itself. I'm not doing like a page to say what the project is.
Yes. And exactly because of that, it makes sense to make them their own routes.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't another way that I could do that without linking it directly.
No, you could get very, very dirty and put the code for each one of the projects inside the data file.
That's what
And
I
so
was, that's a lot of code in there.
it sure is. Yeah, that's getting a little hacky. At this point, because you want it to go to an entirely separate different page, it makes sense to make it its own route. There's nothing wrong with having an app that has, 100 or 200 routes. It's just we want to say, hey, is this dry? And in this case, it is very dry because the code from weather is totally different than the code on portfolio. You're not breaking any rules there, so it's totally fine to do what you did.
Okay. All right.
The
Thank you.
only thing I may do to clean that up is in app. Instead of just linking to /feedback, you could link to /project/feedback. And then you would want, I'm pretty sure this has to go up to here. Let me test that. /project/feedback. Yeah. So that would be a little bit cleaner to say, hey, we're gonna try, and because these pages are all sub, I'm gonna do project/feedback/project/YouTube, and then maybe I put those components over in their own file, their own folder called projects.
So create a project folder and put all of the projects with project.js in there.
Yep. And those are two separate things. Changing the URL and changing the folders are not exactly the same, but they're two cleanup steps that would make it a little bit cleaner.
I did try doing the folders as I was putting them in, like doing a folder for feedback, putting a folder for weather and all of that, but it started breaking in a lot of different places. So I was like, let me do it this way. And then if I open a folder and you drag it into the folder, it will ask you if you want to.
It should, yes.
Then it should be fine.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Great questions. So just to summarize there, what Alba did is she took all of the previous projects that she had completed, and instead of taking it to like a general information page where it says, hey, this is what we built it in, here's a screenshot of it, all of that stuff, she took on the challenge of saying, let me take the entire project and get it working in React. And when I do, I'll just link to that page. But that's not how we initially engineered it, right? We initially engineered it to say, hey, this page is just going to show more information from data.js. And that happens all the time, right? When we're implementing something as an engineer, we run into questions that are going to bubble up of, well, I have two options here. Which one is the more correct one? And in Alba's case, she chose the right one, right? She said, hey, these are different pages entirely. Because of that, we should make their own routes and just link to them that way. But that broke a lot of the work that we did before because we were just assuming, hey, this is going to work like the previous website did. So perfect example of things change. And you want to kind of think through not only the change that you're making, but any complications of that change before you go ahead and do it. All right, go for it.
Max, the New York Times one, which you helped yesterday, it broke again. It stopped working. I don't know what happened.
Go
I
ahead,
was
share
trying
screen.
to submit yesterday and then it just stopped working. So I was trying to, I think in the React, it wasn't like just show first 5 best books, but I was trying to work on it. It just something changed and it just completely everything is gone. So
Okay, share your screen. Let's take a look. Okay, so first place we normally like to start is in the console. So I'm going to head in there. And I'm going to look in here and you've got an array of all the lists coming back. So everything looks good there. I'm going to go back over to your terminal tab and everything's running here. So none of that seems to be the problem. When I pick a list,
it's just showing me that bracket.
okay, so let's see. We're going to go to your option as a list selected on change. The list selected on change gets the value, uses the selected list, gets the data, and it's supposed to set the books. So let's see if we look at our books data and change something here. We're still getting all of our results back. So we know that's not the problem. So we're setting our books into our books up here. That books is going to trigger books.map, and we're going to return stop everything semicolon I'm done.
Oh. So is that the semicolon next to the return is the one which did that?
Yes.
Okay.
The semicolon after the return is like return is already final, and then putting a semicolon right after it, it's like you'll cease anything. No more lines of code. You're done. We're finished. And so we needed the return, but we needed the return in combination with the LI that came after it.
Okay. Thank you, Max.
No problem. And if there are any homework assignments that you guys are like, I don't even know where to start on, let me know. I can go over them in their entirety.
That's very generous of you.
Oh, I didn't say that you would like the speed that I was going to go over them, but I will still offer to go over them.
All right, Max. I guess I have more of a general question. This is regarding my capstone. So I pretty much got it functioning like basically how I want it to work. Right now I'm working on a filter like for the different games / like posts that people put up. I'm kind of running into a specific issue though, where I'm trying to like set the variables for like the different categories for the filter. So like the type of sport, the type of surface. I'm trying to set those into state variables.
Yep.
Right. And they're being selected from a select dropdown. But for some reason, like I can get the selected value to show as whatever I'm like selecting in the drop down, but it won't update the state.
Okay.
And so like I've been looking into it, and it's like I don't know if it's like so the way I understand it is that state, especially state variables for something that's going to change or update on the screen, right? But a select menu technically doesn't change on the screen. Like they're just selecting it, and I want state to update with that value. So one, would that be a reason why state wouldn't update, or?
Yes to all of the above. So you're on the right track. Basically the way, first of all, building any kind of filter is always hard, right? Because when you build a filter, you basically have to write an algorithm to say, how do I want to filter that out? And there is actually a method called .filter in JavaScript that's super helpful. But you're stuck on the problem right before that, which is, hey, I've got this select and I've got it in state, but how do I make it go update this other thing in state based off of the value that got selected?
Right.
So you have two options there. The JavaScripty answer is, hey, in your on change, when you're also setting whatever the value they selected into state is, you could also write your filter right in there and then call set filter results in that on change.
Okay.
That's
And
option one. Option
okay,
two is I'm in my on change, I set my value, and then I'm going to use use effect. And in the dependency array, I'm going to put whatever the value is in state for the select.
okay.
Because that changes, the dependency array is going to trigger the use effect to run, and then it could set in your filtered search results into another state variable.
Okay. So that's what that second solution sounds pretty good. Because right now I have the games taken out of local storage and I have them in a state variable. But I have found that adding that into the dependency like makes it like loop or something. So so I found different ways. It's really hacky. I made a Boolean state so that like I just do not Boolean, and like that'll get it to trigger to update like on certain things. But really I'm just trying to get the functionality there. But okay, that explains a lot with the state. For some reason, like I used the on change. I used like on change and I put the dynamically change the value to state. Right. And I figured that would work. We've done that in other projects, but for some reason, it wasn't working. So
if you're stuck on it, feel free to share your screen and we can try and tackle it together.
Okay, sure, that's fine. Okay, I'll press that. And this one here. Okay, are you able to see that?
Yep.
Okay. So basically this is the website. I changed the colors a little bit, but let me move this thing. This is always like in the way, it throws me off. All right, so yeah, I gotta label the stuff better, but this is where the filter is currently. And like so these are just like some dummy games that I posted. And right now, so I've got the filter set up right now. So like it kind of works, but it only works for sports, right? So if I filter basketball, it only show the basketball games. If I hit reset, it gets all the games back.
Nice.
I'll do another one like volleyball.
Very
just
impressive.
The volleyball games. Oh,
cool.
Thank you. You can add games down here. I'll just do something silly.
Other students are watching. This is what I want to see on Monday.
Okay. So yeah, you post that game and that gets added to the end of the games there.
Cool.
I have it's just to kind of mimic going to another game, like seeing the location, things like that. Close, go back to the games. And they can even be deleted. So let's delete that one. All right. So the issue comes in, as I said, with the filter. Like right now it's like really hacky. I'm almost even embarrassed to show it, but let me see. It's like so I created like a filter object.
You got to restart your screen share with the VS Code window.
Okay, let me see. All right, so I stop share and then start share again.
Yep.
Okay, this time with the let me share. Okay. Okay, you
Okay,
see my
cool.
code now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. All right, so right now I use like this thing called like a filter object. It's global, and I just make it this update when I change the value of the select. And then when I run the filter, when I run this filter function, it kind of just checks that filters work. But as you can see, this is really like janky. And so basically, I guess, and it's so hard to replicate. I'm not even try to do it right now, but like, as you can see, so up here I had set like, so right, like how I have set sport and sports set sport, I had a set filter sport and a filter sport, right? And I had them update from, see if I can find the drop down. So like down here. So I get what you said about on the on change, you can run the filter because that's basically what I was trying to do. But for some reason, and of course, this is what it was like now, but when before on change, I had the value for the set filter sport variable. Does that make sense?
Yep.
But it wouldn't update. Like if I would like, after I would run this on change, if I was to console.log, like what was the variable in set filter sport, it would be like blank or whatever variable I put in it initially.
So my suggestion here would be to store whatever the selected filter is in their own state variables. So you would have 4 different state variables for filter sport, filter distance, filter whatever. And just make the on change only only update the value in state. And then on click of your filter button, that's when I would pull those 4 values out of state, figure out which ones are empty or not empty, and then write my filter equation against those 4 values.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
That's not saying that's the only way to do it, and I'm not saying that's the best way to do it. I'm just saying that's the way that I would do it. Okay.
And that's, to me, that makes the most sense to me, and that's the most like clear path to at least getting it to function how I want it to function. It's reassuring to hear that that's not wrong to set state from a select menu. Okay.
No, you definitely setting state from an on change or on value or on click, on change, on check, and I think there's one other one, but that's all very common to tie them into state. And it's even common to call filter right in an on change. If you wanted it to live update, so every time they changed one of the drop downs,
I started trying to do that, and that was really hard. But that's ideally how I would want it to work. But I had my second option was to click the button like to filter it. But okay, so you're saying like that way would be best to use like a dot find,
a dot filter.
Dot filter. Okay. Now, my thing with that is, and not to get too far in the weeds, like, does that create like another array? Because basically what happens is I have to like make this separate from I can't update local storage, right? So like, that's where I pull from like my original, it's like the database basically, right? So like I set state into like these, like, these different arrays based on the function that's called on them, right?
So it's very common to have something like search results be its own value in state, and then say if there is if search results is null, then show the items from local storage, otherwise show the search results.
I see.
And that way you're not modifying your local storage, but you're also making it easy to say, hey, when I hit the reset button, set my search results to null, and then down in my return is going to be smart enough and say, oh, there's nothing in search results, so use my value from local storage instead.
Got it. All right. Thank you very much. That answers pretty much my questions up to this point.
That's a weekend's worth of homework right there for you.
Yeah. It's a lot of logic, but once you understand how it should work, it's, I think I wouldn't call it the easy part, but yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Great questions. I'm impressed that you got any filtering to work in the first place. Filtering is definitely a tricky thing.
Yeah, it's probably the most difficult thing I've done in class so far, but it's fun, thank you.
And I don't want to dishearten you because I think all of those steps will be very good practice. But once we learn how to filter in the database, you're going to have to rebuild that entire functionality. But it will be very good practice because it's usually more efficient to filter in the database, because instead of dumping that on the client's computer, databases, that's one thing they're really good at, right? Is filtering through data and only matching your query. So we're going to have to modify that if you ended up wanting to put search end in your back end to have that run in the database instead of filter on the front end. However, that is something that whenever a user comes to me and says, hey, I need some filtering functionality here, I have to make a conscious decision to say, do I build this on the back end or do I build this on the front end? Does the user want to see all 100 items anyway, and then they can filter down, in which case they need 100 items already on the front end, so we'll do the filter there? Or are there 100,000 items and nothing's going to show up until they give me some filter parameters? And at that point, I would go build that feature on the back end. So even though at some point we may want to consider moving that filter to the back end in your project, for now, it's a very good practice of state and on change and writing a filter algorithm all in your JavaScript.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I have another question. We
Shoot.
use your image for the MaxFlex. How do I change that to mine?
How do you generate it?
I did generate it and I put it in the project itself, but I don't know if I could just copy it from there. I just don't create the card itself because we did it from your HTTP.
Oh, that was dirty of me. In the source, if you put it in your public folder, in the IMG tag, you just start it with a slash and then whatever the name of your file is, or slash in the folder and another slash in the name, and then it should work fine.
So I should go into my find my logo first and figure out what that name is, and then change your HTTP to the backslash image and backslash
whatever the name of the PNG file is.
All right.
Yep.
I'll try to.
And don't forget to copy that JPEG or PNG or whatever it is and paste it into your public folder as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Now you see when the instructor cheats and just goes, oh, I've got a web server. Let me just throw those over there and we'll be good to go. I did Nathan proud this weekend. I built a bot that whenever a recorded meeting finishes, that's a one-on-one, it automatically emails you now a link of the recording. And I got through the whole thing and I'm like, all right, took me 4.5 hours to do this. It's working. I'm proud of it. I'm ready to turn it on. And then I went, crap, I got to deploy this. And it took me just a solid hour to just get it deployed and functional. So do not worry. Nathan is coming back for a week and a half right before the career week to teach you guys all about deploying and how to get your backend working. I was actually talking to him yesterday about how you guys are going to get your backends deployed and all of that stuff. So that's also on the radar. And if anyone is curious as to what I built, it's actually public on GitHub. I will drop a link in the live stream channel if you're curious.
What would be learning Node, or like what would be doing with Node.js? Okay.
Yep, Node.js.
Mongo or whatever, or just Node?
Node with Postgres, a package called Sequelize. we're going to be learning Postgres is the name of the database.
Gotcha.
And SQLize is the name of the package, and SQL or SQL is the name of the language. Node Express, we're going to learn about body parser and cores, which I know you guys have already been introduced to, but we're going to learn how to handle cores in our backend code to allow different cross-origin requests to come in. And I think that's it. The complexity changes when we get into backend. It is no longer a matter of, oh, they're all of these new concepts. It's more a matter of, oh, they're all of these concepts that get spread out across all these different files, and keeping track of how it's all flowing. Doing our numbering exercise will become even more important, except now it's not just going to be all in one folder. It's going to be in 2 or 3 different folders that we have open at the same time.
Heard. Okay.
I just have a question. When you and this is more of like your personal preference question. When you create new pages, do you create a new file for each page, or do you create one major file with all the pages and then have all of the routes? And then
I normally do a separate file for each route or each page. And then if that page is going to have more than 2 or 3 components in it, I make a folder and I make new pages for each one of the components.
okay.
So like,
I'm trying to like think of ways to kind of like break down. I start from the beginning. I don't just
very
but
best place
like
to start.
for instance, like my front page, it has a nav bar, it has the background picture, it has the sign in button at the top, and like 4 standardized test cards that I'm going to include in there. So I just don't know how to, in React, on how to kind of like structure those folders so that it doesn't become overwhelming. So do I do just a separate file in an SRC, or do I do a separate folder with all those pages and all those components, or not components, but
Yeah,
basically routes?
components. Yeah. It's weird because components, we know components is like, oh, you call it with the little tag, but now with router, entire components are becoming their own pages, right?
Right.
So, which is, can kind of be used interchangeably here, but they aren't interchangeable terms. So it's always a little weird there. The answer is, it really doesn't matter to the computer. It's up to you how you want to organize your files. But because you said what would your personal preference be, what I would do is I would make a folder called lib, L-I-B, short for library, and whatever components were going to show up on more than one page, I would put in the lib. So my nav bar, my sidebar, maybe if there's a footer, right, those are all things that are going to show up on multiple pages. So I put them in their own folder called lib.
Okay.
Then for my home page, I would say, all right, how many components are going to be on my home page? And if the answer is more than 2 or 3 that aren't, not counting the ones in the lib folder, then I'm going to make a folder called home. But if it's just my home page and maybe I have 3 or 4 components in the home page, but they're all only like 15 lines each, I'm going to just create one file called home.js and put those subcomponents into that home.
Okay. Okay.
So it really just depends. Normally, when I cross that line, that's when I start making new folders.
Okay. So if it's getting too much code and you can't really follow, just make new folders. Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
Caitlin is joining us as TA. We had a last minute change up here. So If you have any questions, feel free to message Caitlin, and I can also put you guys in a breakout room if she can't figure out how. Or I can go in a breakout room as well.
No, that's fine. Sorry, I have my camera on in a second. I'm just getting situated.
Oh, you're fine. Cameras are optional at this point because it's like everyone's working. No one needs a super close up. At work, when we first went remote about 4 years ago, we had our cameras on all the time and just stayed on mute. So if we needed each other, we could just unmute and shout each other's names. And the number of times my boss would see my camera where I'm going, and can't figure something out, and I'm leaning in super close to my monitor, I felt bad for him.
Hey Max, time is weird. The little function you helped me with yesterday, right?
Mhm.
Whenever it's a new time, it doesn't load in. It's like for example, 6:05, the O won't load. It'll just be 6:5. I'm just like, what the heck?
So I've got two answers for you there. One, I can show you how to fix that. Well, sorry, that was my brain trailed off there. I can either show you how to fix that by writing another if statement or modifying the if statement. The other way I can show you is how to use the date FNS date functions library in case you're curious to see how that works.
Let's go to FNS route just to see.
Okay. Share your screen. Will probably take 10 minutes to do, but will be worth it. Rainer must have been offended that I said it would take 10 minutes because he left the meeting.
I got kicked.
I noticed.
Oh yeah. I was in the middle of sharing my screen and it was like, yeah, no. Um Boop, boop, boop. Just give me a moment. I didn't get kicked this time, so someone's
Okay. It's always
Damn.
nice when people aren't kicking you, or computers for that matter.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is, let me request remote. And I'm going to pop open your terminal and hit Control C to stop it. And we're going to npm I date FNS.
Oh, I didn't know this was something I had to install.
Yeah, anytime you have a node package, whether it's React Router DOM or date functions is a popular one. When we get into the back end, we're going to be installing cores and body parser and a couple other things. So we will definitely be installing more in the future, but I'm going to start this back up. Okay. And then I'm going to slide, actually, I'm going to stay in there and I'm going to go look up the documentation because I can never use date functions without their documentation, because you will see here are all the different functions built into date functions. And it keeps going and going and going and going. There are a ton of things you can do with a date. What we want to do is we want to format the date. And so if I pop open that documentation, it's going to give me a breakdown of all these different letters I can use to get certain things out from it. But what I really want is the example that's all the way down at the bottom. So we pull in format using our import format from date functions format, and then we pass in the date and whatever format we want to come out. So
Well,
what
the
we're going to go ahead.
Oh, what would the options be?
The options, they document down here. So you can say what day you want the week to start on. So if you want the week to start on Monday, you can pass the 1 in there. You can say if it's the first week, include other information. It's basically just modifying how that date is formatted. I don't think I've ever used options with the format function, but we will be using the first 2. So to show that, what we're going to do is we're going to go all the way up and we're going to import format from date functions /format. And we could have used the curly braces there, but if we specify the /, it's going to import only that section or that function of the code. So now we come down here, and instead of doing all of this work, all we need to do is say return a format of today's date, and then we've got to tell it what format we want to show up. So we're going to say, hey, we want, and what do you want to show up?
AM, PM.
Do you want the current day to show or just the time?
Yeah, current day.
Okay.
Just the time. I mean,
just the time, not the date.
Yep, just the time.
Okay. So we kind of build that, right? We say, all right, we want the hour to show up, but we don't want the hour to show up in military time. We want the hour to show up 0 through 11. So because of that, we use a capital K. And then we say, okay, we want the minutes to show up next, but we want them to show up if it's 0 minutes, if it's 8 o'clock right on the dot. We don't want 1 0 to show up. We want the 2 zeros to show up.
Right.
But in our hour, we actually don't want that leading 0 to show up. If we did, we would use KK. Down here, because we want that leading minute or that leading 0 to show, we're going to use MM.
That's interesting.
And then finally, we're going to say we want the AM or PM to show up. And that is going to be, we decide, do you want it with periods or without periods?
Either or, really. Let's go with without.
Okay, so that's BBB. So where you say BBB. I'm going to save that. And I'm just going to comment all of this out for now, so it's not freaking out that we've got code after the return.
Gotcha.
And this one as well. And now we're going to go back over to your browser.
Oh, sorry. Dude, it's in here.
Somewhere. There you go. And look at what your time is.
That's dope. I was also trying to increase the icon, but I'm assuming there's, because I was playing around with the CSS and it's not doing what I want.
Yeah, so because it's an image now and not a an emoji, you can't size it with font size. However, you can size it with height or width.
I tried doing that. Like I put an ID inside the URL and then I tried to upload it that way. And it still wasn't working. But
you want to share your screen again and I'll fix that for you too?
Sure. I mean, why
not? Okay, so let me request remote. The biggest thing that you've got to be careful of is exactly what you were saying. When you're trying to target the icon, which in this case, it's right here, we want to make sure that we're targeting the IMG, not what the IMG is necessarily in. So on this one, I'm going to add like current weather icon. and copy that, go to our app and use that right here. Except now I can say, let's make the width of it 400 pixels, make it huge. Now you've
Oof.
got really big clouds.
Mm-hmm. It does a job. I'll play with it though. Thank you.
No problem. And you can play with making that column a little bit wider and this column over here a little bit shorter. And then you can size that to whatever you want.
Okay.
You could also do a width 100% on the image itself. And then the image will always be as big as the column allows it to be, which is a good responsive trick.
I'm not too good CSS, but noted.
All right, hey Max, if you got a sec, I think I've been able to replicate the issue that I'm having with the filter state.
Go for it.
Can I share screen?
Yep.
I don't need this anymore. Ooh, let me move this off.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so right here, I didn't want to do too much to the filter sport because that's the one that's actually like working. So if you can kind of see what I did here, I'm not sure if this is wrong or anything. So basically I made a function on the on change. So I console logged the target value, right? That does show as what it's supposed to be. I set the filter surface, right, to that target value. And then I set console.log to filter surface, all right?
Before you even go, I know exactly what your problem is. And believe it or not, your code is working. The answer is that set filter surface actually runs asynchronously.
Oh, so it's like a promise.
It's like a promise, except you can't use an await with it. It forces it to run itself asynchronously, and you get nothing from it. So to prove what's going to happen is I'm going to request remote control.
Okay.
And I'm going to put in a little button. And this is just to show you what's working under the hood that says log surface. And when we do a click on that, all we're going to do is console log out the filter service. And we're going to leave this code exactly as is. So if you switch over to your browser and...
Okay, I gotta stop sharing, right?
Yep.
And then switch over. Okay.
Or you can do it on your own. It
That's
basically just change the select and you're going to see the same behavior as that second console log. Doesn't look like it's updated, but as soon as you click the button, you'll see it actually is updated.
Okay, so you can see now, right?
Yep.
We'll go to inspect to the console. All right, let me refresh just to make sure it's clear. All right, so you said I click this.
Yep, and that's going to log out empty or whatever the current filter is.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the current filter is just an empty string.
Yep. So that's
I
what
see.
you're
Okay,
seeing.
and so it's just logging out an empty string. Okay.
So now change your filter surface type to change the dropdown.
Oh, changed. Okay.
And you're going to get the same behavior, right? Of 166.
Okay.
You think it's setting that value right, and it's still empty, but hit the log surface button. And now you see outdoors in there.
Interesting. I'm a little confused as to how that's happening, but that does explain why it wasn't working because that was really driving me crazy as to like how a state wasn't updating.
It is working. It is updating your state. You know what? I've got an even better example of this. Take me back to your code for 1 second.
Okay.
Is E interchangeable with event? Because I'm like, what the heck is that E? Yeah.
Yes. You can name parameters whatever you want as long as the order is the same.
Yeah, sometimes I use event, sometimes I use E, depending on who I've just watched or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
We can further this by removing out this button entirely. I'm just going to comment it out. Feel free to delete it later. I'm going to just put the variable of whatever the current surface is. Is it
It's
filter
filter surface. Yeah.
So now you'll see when you change your drop down right above it, it will show you the value in state, and it will show you that when you change the drop down that the state actually is getting updated.
Okay, so if I
So really all that goes to show you is that when you call a set state, it actually is setting it in the state, but it takes a couple milliseconds for it to update in the state, realize that it needs to re-render and show that value. So whenever you need to console log something out, if you're console logging what you're setting the state out to, instead it's better to console log the event target value than it is to console log out the state value itself.
Okay, so it's literally, so basically what you're saying is this, even when I see that console log is blank, that state is updated with that value. It's just console logging before the
state update is done.
Function that's finished. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That makes my plans for the filters so much better now that I know there's actually stuff in there. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
That is a great question, and I'm sure someone else is going to run into that as well. Unfortunately, there is no way to put like an await on that, because there is some answer that I started reading and realized that I needed a PhD in computer science to understand of why that happens. And basically the answer is React, when it sets the state, it does all this complicated code to detect what pieces of your components need to update. And because that takes a couple seconds, they can't just put an await on it. They can't just make it promise based, in other words. So it's just a, I don't want to call it an edge case of React, but it's something definitely to keep in mind of, hey, when I set state, it isn't necessarily going to be done by the time I run the next line.
No, that explains enough as it is. I can only imagine all the stuff that React is doing on our behalf, and we can give it a few milliseconds. Thanks.
React also does this cool thing where if you set a couple state variables all at the same time, and you're looking at it and you're like, oh, I'm setting 5 different, sets, that would be really inefficient, right? Because you would think every time I call that set, it's got to re-render, and then it goes and it finds my next set, and then it's got to go show that data and re-render it. React does some magic voodoo under the hood that I don't want to know about. It detects that you're setting 5 at the same time and will batch that render together with all 5 all at once instead of re-rendering it every time you call set. No idea how it works, but it does. So I just let React be React.
That's that Facebook engineer salary skills, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, I do not want to think about how much the creator of React is paid to work every day at Facebook. Jennifer, you have a question?
Yeah, hi. I wanted to figure out in my portfolio how I would put, you showed us earlier about putting images in, but I would need to review that.
Sure.
I'd love to put a background image in my portfolio. So I already have it in my SRC folder.
Okay.
Where it should be?
Yes and no. Images are complicated in React. So let me put it like this. Where do you want to put your background image? Do you want to put it in your CSS as a background image, or do you want to put it in as an image element in your page?
I want it to be the background.
Okay, so we're going to do that with CSS. So let me request remote control. When we put our background images in our CSS, instead of it going into the source folder, it's instead going to go into the public folder.
Ooh, I like
And-
what you just did with that.
This is the column view in Finder. You're probably used to this view. I fell in love with the column view, and this is the only view that I ever use in Finder because you can understand every time you go into a folder, you get moved over a little bit. You have to get used to the horizontal scrolling back and forth, but once you do, I almost exclusively use this view in Finder.
You can move things easier for sure.
Oh yeah. And I'm gonna rename this as header background.
Okay.
Just so it's easier to reference. Having 2 periods in file names kind of freaks me out a little bit. I don't think it would actually cause a problem, but it's better safe than sorry to, I know you didn't name it, but
I did.
okay.
You named it that way, but good to know.
Dashes and underscores are better than periods and spaces.
Okay.
Okay, now that it's in there, what we are going to do is I'm going to go to your home. I'm going to look inside your header, and your header already has an ID of intro. So we're going to use that, and we're going to go to your app CSS, and I'm going to put that selector up here. And then I'm going to say, hey, your background image. And this is where I am thankful for students like Alba, because she already taught me how to do this. We are going to put a URL in, and then we've got to say, all right, how do we get to the URL? We are currently in app, and the image is all the way up in public. So we are in app, and we need to get out of the source folder. So we do 2 periods. Then we want to go into the public folder. So we do public with a slash. And then inside that public folder, I want to use the header background.
Cool. Very cool.
So I'm going to save that. I'm going to make sure I'm using my selector properly because it's an ID, so it needs a pound. And there, believe it or not, is your image. It is just a very zoomed in image. So what we get to do is we use something called background size. So we say something like background size is going to be a cover, is going to be a contain. I always have to play around with these until I get it. Okay, so that's a step in the right direction. But now well, if we do the whole thing, it's going to crop it the way we had it before.
Okay.
So what I'm going to suggest we do is I'm going to, your Finder was over here. I'm going to crop this image a little bit because this is such a vertical image and we want it to be a lot more horizontal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag in preview out on this, just this bottom portion. And maybe I'll go a little bit higher on it. And then I'm going to hit Command K, which crops it for us. Then when I save it and go back over and refresh, now we're on the right track, but we still have a little bit of a repeat going on here. So what I'm going to do is say, not only do we want to contain it, we want our background repeat to no repeat. And maybe let's switch this from contain to cover now that it's the right aspect ratio. And now we're in good shape.
Okay, cool. So I need to move or change the size of that. Oh, okay. So I can't just have it be there, huh?
You want it in the about section as well?
I want it to be this whole thing.
So
that the flowers would be kind of on the bottom. If somebody scrolled to the bottom, they'd see the flowers there. instead of just all up in it.
So do you want the flowers to be the background of the portfolio and the contact and all of that?
Yeah, I was going to get rid of the background color for the contact and portfolio.
That's much harder to accomplish.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's impossible, but it would take me probably 15 minutes to figure it out, and it would be better during a one-on-one.
Okay.
Background images that are static are not particularly popular. Only because you get the sense that the content is kind of floating on top of the background, as opposed to when you scroll the page, you're scrolling with the content. So while a background image for like a hero or a header is pretty common for something like this, it's less common to have the text kind of be scrolling on top of it and the image stay in place, which is, I think, what you're trying to get it to do.
I'm not sure if we're talking about the same thing, but it would be more complicated to have it fill the entire website that somebody would look at from like top to bottom, right to left on the screen. Yeah, that'd be the hard part.
Yes, we are talking almost about the same things. Yes,
Okay.
it would be more complicated to do that, and it wouldn't be as mobile responsive either.
Right.
But it is something that we could achieve. It's just basically what we have to do is we have to put all the HTML elements in their own div and make that div scrollable.
Okay. All right, so I'm just going to make a few changes to make it more cohesive this way for now.
It is feasible, and like I said, if you want to schedule a one-on-one, we can work on it, but it's probably going to take like 30 lines of CSS to pull off.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go for simpler then for now.
Cool, sounds good.
Capstone. Can you first help me find where I've got this background color coming from?
For contact or for the about section?
Contact, for portfolio.
Yep. So in your about, no, that's your H2. Here's in your contact, this is your background color.
Okay, there it is.
So if we take that out, that should solve your contact. And then down in portfolio, you should have something similar. Here's your background slate blue.
Okay.
And that takes care of that.
Okay, this is nicer. Great. Thank you. I think
No
I was
problem.
Thanks, Max.
Oh, I'm sorry. I stopped your screen sharing. Did you have anything else?
No, not for now. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Just coming to myself.
Cool.
So how do we get help with algorithms?
You ask a question and share your screen and I help you write one?
Oh no, I can't share my screen. It will not allow me.
Still?
Maybe a one-on-one.
Do me a favor. In your Zoom, in the very top where the apple is in the top left, go to zoom.us and click on About Zoom.
Yep.
What version are you on?
5.12.9.
Okay, so you're a little behind, but not like Stone
Okay.
Ages behind. Maybe try going to Zoom US and hit check for updates. And it's gonna like kick you out of the meeting and it will take like 2 minutes to install it, but see if that fixes it for you.
Okay. Well,
Because if it is, it will be a lot easier to teach you an algorithm.
Okay, because I'll need a few, but I'm gonna install it and it'll probably kick me out.
Cool.
Hey, Max.
Yes.
All right. I was trying to listen. What you told Exona about the Zoom.
Yep. Go
And-
up to Zoom US in the top left.
Huh?
And then drop down to check for updates.
Check for updates. Okay. It says the updates available. The new version is 5.12.9. I'm on 5.12.2.
How are you on 5.12.9 and I'm on 5.13.4?
No. I'm on 5.12.2. With the latest is 0.9. I'm on 0.2.
Yeah, but I don't understand how the latest is 0.9 when I'm on 0.13.
Interesting.
Maybe did you? No, you didn't install it from the App Store. I don't think it's even on the App Store.
Are you like a developer for Apple? Or tester rather?
Kind of, but not. I don't have I'm not enrolled in the beta program for Zoom.
Okay. All right.
I know better than to beta test an application that my living is dependent on. Anyway, run those updates and see if it fixes your screen share issues.
All right, I'll try it now.
See ya. Welcome back, Archel. You're on mute.
Of course I was. Should I arbitrarily try to share my screen?
Go for it.
All right, let's see if it works now.
Yay. All right, we got one fix. Let's see.
All right, perfect. So I'm gonna stop sharing. Woohoo!
Drum roll for Exona. You're on mute.
I know, I saw that. Yay!
Updating software for the win.
Update. No, so my question is, because this is from, I just honestly, first and foremost, I just created folders. And then
Nice.
each folder has a JS and CSS, just so
Cool.
I don't get freaking lost, because
Mhm.
I know I will. So I know that with which page is it? I know that with my search page and my results page, I know that I'm gonna need an algorithm. I haven't done that. I'm gonna be honest with you, I did not do that code, but I just don't know. How would I tie API with the filters and kind of get a algorithm?
So I would say don't get ahead of your skis on this one.
Okay.
Because we're going to have an example in when we get into full stack, we're going to build a search where the search is going to go into the database and use those queries and make that show up.
Okay.
So I would say focus on just getting your UI together. But for
Okay.
that feature in particular, all you really will need is a text input and the button to start the search.
Mhm.
And then if you want to build the search results page, you could also do that.
Yeah, I have the results page right here.
So I would just say fake it till you make it on that one and make the search button just take you to the results page. And it won't actually run the search itself, but we'll get into that when we get into backend.
Okay, so when we get, okay, cool. I probably won't be able to do it until then, but sure, yeah, thank you.
if you do get there and you're like, twiddling your fingers and you're like, man, I'm roadblocked, I don't have anything to do on my site, then we could definitely do an algorithm there. But until we get to that point, it's probably worth waiting on that one.
Okay, all right, cool. I mean, just the fact that I was able to break down these files is enough for me.
Nice. Did you get your router started?
No. Oh, there's nothing on these files.
Router and components next.
Right, exactly. I have to copy my code and put it in, but yes, I will.
One step at a time. Components and router before you start copying code, though.
Okay. Gotcha. I'll do that.
Cool. Good luck.
Thank you.
Off to a good start.
Thank you.
I'm gonna disappear for my break.
Yeah, if anyone wants to take a break, feel free. Not talking to us, are you, Archer?
What'd you say, Max?
You're not talking to us, are you?
No, I was talking to my son. I'm sorry. I thought I wasn't muted for a second. I got nervous.
No. You're good. Sorry, I just saw you talking and wanted to make
Right,
sure you didn't
no.
have a question.
All right, no. All right.
To us.
Thanks.
He was talking about us, Max.
No, not at all. Not at all.
I'm just kidding.
All right.
Bro just shot himself.
I swear. You heard that number?
Hey, Max, I got 2 questions. What's
Oh, you're
TypeScript?
saving them up for me, huh?
What's TypeScript? TypeScript. I keep wanting to ask, but then I forget.
Caitlin, have you been going behind my back, stealing ideas into my students?
What, does she use TypeScript?
No, but we were just talking.
Very topical question. TypeScript is a you were asking earlier about compiling versus transpiling. TypeScript is another one where we're kind of transpiling. So TypeScript is built on top of JavaScript, just like React is built on top of JavaScript. TypeScript is a modification of the JavaScript programming language that allows us to set types for each one of our variables. And so in theory, that's really helpful to say, hey, if we've got this variable called num, and at some point during our code, we start treating that number as a Boolean, TypeScript is going to flag our code and give us red squigglies faster to say, yo, heads up, this variable isn't in the right type. You should fix this. However, the reason why we don't teach it is, one, it is additional syntax to learn. And syntax is already tricky enough, and we're throwing 5 syntaxes at you already. So we don't want to throw TypeScript at you as a 6th. Another reason is, while it continues to gain more and more adoption, I don't feel that it's useful enough to teach to our students quite yet, because it's pretty easy to pick up on TypeScript after the boot camp, because once you get familiar with the JavaScript syntax, it's much easier to layer on additional syntax like variable types on top of it. And then the third reason we don't teach it is because it's another setup step. You can't just start using TypeScript and run TypeScript directly in the browser. You need to compile your TypeScript back down into vanilla JavaScript before you're able to run it. So for all of those reasons, that's why we don't teach it. However, TypeScript continues to get more popular. And if you see a job description that has TypeScript in it, just know that they mean JavaScript with a couple little syntax tweaks on top of it for when you declare a variable.
So what I got from that was pretty much that TypeScript itself, like, it catches errors for you, I guess.
It catches errors when your variables are different types than what you mean them to be.
Gotcha. Okay. Second question. Do you know any other frameworks besides React? Like, I hear Angular is pretty popular.
I made the decision 5 or 6 years ago at this point to learn React. And Angular was the big competitor at the time. I actually built projects in both of them to just get a little sense of them. And then I did some research into their histories and the companies that support them and their open source licenses, because a little over 5 years ago, I had the opportunity where my boss said, if you're going to build it from scratch, you might as well build it in what you want to build it in. Go learn whatever makes sense. And so I fortunately picked React. I'm sure Angular would have been perfectly fine. But React continues to outpace the market and be the largest market leader. However, Angular is not far behind it. Angular is, in my opinion, it has a steeper learning curve. It's got more files to navigate. And I personally don't I prefer React over Angular, because Angular, you need kind of a bigger project, where React, you start small and then you can build up on top of it from there. So if you came to me as an Angular developer, especially if you're a senior developer, I wouldn't bat an eye and I would still hire you, because if you know Angular, all of those same concepts are going to translate into React. They may be called different things, but Angular has a version of routing. Angular has the notion of state. Angular has a bunch of different things there. So they're similar frameworks. I have nothing against Angular. It's just React is the one that I learned. With all of that said, there are a ton of frameworks or languages that I learned that I don't use anymore. I learned PHP, and that was my first server-side language, and that was really powerful with WordPress, and still is powerful with WordPress. But I started a new job, and that job had code in Python, and I worked with Python for 2 years and learned all about Django. But Django as a framework was much easier to learn because I had already worked in a full stack framework that was using the model view controller, which is MVC, is something that we'll learn as we get into it. My first programming language was Java, and I would pay someone to never have to write another line of Java in my life. Yes, there are a ton of different languages that I used at one point and now no longer use. But you do reach a point in your coding career where no matter what the language is, chances are you'll be able to read it. You might not be able to write it or debug it, but you do get to a point where you're like, all right, I can understand this code no matter what language it's in.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was unmuted, and you can probably hear my keyboard. My bad. Um, Reminder, even if you don't know where you're lost or you don't have a capstone started, you can reach out for help or shoot me a Zoom message or whatever it is. I'm around. Utilize this time.
I just have a weird question. So when you have a drop down menu, say like one that has all the states
Mhm.
and all of the US territories, is there an easier way without having it be an option? Like, is there an easier way than just naming all the options?
No.
Okay, I figured as
You can get all the states in an array if the array is more manageable, and then you can map over that array to generate out the options.
Mhm.
And then you could even put the states in their own JS file that just exported out the array, and that way it's not like 50 plus lines of code to get all of your states to show up as options.
Mhm.
That is one approach. I've definitely seen that happen. So that's one method you can take.
Okay, so just have it be its own JS file.
Yep. And I can help you set that up if you're ready.
I'm not, but thank you. I will definitely remember that.
Sure. While you guys are working on your code, I'm actually taking all of that code that I sent in the live stream earlier that makes the Zoom email send based off of who signed up in Calendly. And I'm currently refactoring all of that. So I'm actually getting it to the point where that code is much more readable, because the computer can run it, and that's the order that we wrote it, doesn't necessarily mean it's easy for other people, other programmers to read it. So I'm currently going back in and refactoring all of that code so that instead of 125 lines or 150 lines or however long it was initially, it now only is 20 lines of code, and those 20 lines of code go out and call different functions, which is a way we can refactor and make it better. But I ran into that exact same thing in Zona. I had my email and it was like 30 lines of text right in the middle of all of my code. I'm like, oh, this is ugly. I don't
Mhm.
want my email showing up there, but at the same time, it's got to send the email at that point in the code.
Right.
And so that's exactly what I did. I created a file called emailcontent.js and I moved it all into there so it doesn't look like I've got a giant text block in my code.
Okay. Oh, nice. Yeah, because this is like literally over 60 lines of just options
Yes.
to choose from, and I don't want that there.
You have any sites you'd recommend for like design inspirations?
Ooh, very good question. I do. Give me a second to find them.
Okay.
I have one I can send you. The sites on this are very ambitious, but they're cool to look at and might give you some like color ideas and things like that. I have one I'm gonna send.
Did you say her name?
No, I didn't.
So you said Adelaide.
No.
He is so cute.
She's talkative at home, just not in front of everybody else.
There's maybe it was Figma. I can't remember. There's one company that does like an email newsletter of design inspiration.
The one I just sent is my favorite.
Yeah, I'm aware of awards. Those sites are crazy.
They're
I'm
so
very-
wild, but like I've gotten so many good. You can see things that are like trending in terms of like common practices on sites, and then B, like color schemes that you wouldn't normally think of, font pairings, things like that. It's fun to look at. So
Yeah, check out. I see those who specialize in the front end development.
Yeah.
Their sites are insane. Like it does the cool thing where you can like scroll or hover over and it will change the colors. I'm like, what the heck?
it's so cool.
That's a really good one. And it's not the one that I was thinking of. And now I'm very mad that I can't remember it.
Damn.
Take your time, Max.
Well, it's going to be one of those things that I'm going to be up until midnight until I find it because it's going to drive me crazy. I actually subscribed to their email newsletter a while ago, and then every week I would see something really pretty and just cry myself to sleep knowing I couldn't ever build something like that. And so eventually I just unsubscribed.
That CSS stuff is hard. I don't know how they do it.
That's why it's someone's whole job.
Found it. Just be warned that, well, one, it's not all website design. It's any design in general, which is really cool to see some design like impact the physical world as well. So they do a weekly design inspiration. They have done 383 of them. And I feel like they're... I forget who Muesli is owned by, or I guess it's Muesli. But they're a really good source of inspiration.
A lot of these look 3D-ish. I cannot do 3D.
It's inspiration, not necessarily what you're...
Expectation.
Exactly. Thank you. I will say that to Caitlin's point, visual design is its own entirely separate art, quite literally. And there are some interesting like courses and books available for design principles. That's very similar to, like, if you think about how a song is written and you would sit down with a piece of paper in front of you and you'd have no idea how to write a song or what song would sound good, right? But when you learn music theory, you learn, oh, this is a chorus and this is the beat and the beats per minute all add in and here are the chords that go together, and all of a sudden you have the theory behind what makes a good song, so it makes it much easier to write the song. The same goes for visual design. And I will also pass along the Material UI Design Guide, where you see Material Designer, you see Bootstrap, and you think, yeah, that's pretty, I'll just use whatever they've built. But when you go through and read through the foundation that makes up Material, they go down all the way to the point of saying, like, this is why these colors go together, or hey, the reason why this design looks so good and this one doesn't is because it's using consistent margins and it's using, margins that are all divisible by 2, and because of that it looks more right. Like, there's a whole design principle behind it. But you could spend easily 2 or 3 months focusing only in on visual design. And that's a rabbit hole that I purposely know not to go down, because I will never be a good designer. What I do know I will be good at is using things designers have built for me and adding in that functionality. So that's something where I've kind of set up my own personal boundaries, because if you try to learn everything, you will endlessly be learning. But if that is something where you go, hey, this is somewhere where I want to channel my learning and maybe spend an hour a day just learning a little bit more about it, there are definitely some great courses on LinkedIn Learning and YouTube on visual design concepts and going from there.
Thank you. And thank you as well, Caitlin.
You're welcome.
Mm,
All right, we are 10 minutes from the end of class. I'm going to post a quick poll for you guys, if you don't mind answering what you would like to do tomorrow. The options are we can either do a review of just general concepts. We'll just run down the list of use state to props to parent-child components. We can re-review the blog project, or we can do exactly what we did tonight, and I just hang out and answer any questions as they pop up, and you guys can use that time to work on homework catch-up and on your capstones.
So just a quick question, because I actually have to leave.
Mhm.
But my question is, would you be able to go over the router again? Because I think you went over it a little bit on the class that I was muted.
Mhm.
So if
Yeah.
you could just go over that just a little bit, just so that I have an understanding on how to implement it into my project.
Sure thing. Yeah,
Thank you.
we will cover that, and we will cover just basic project setup as well, just in case anyone is stuck at that step, because the router is kind of part of all of that setup. But we'll review project setup, routing, and the difference between components used as parent-child versus components used as their own page, which is kind of related to what Alba's question was towards the beginning of class.
Right. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
I know we've learned about use effect and use state, but there's like a bunch of other hooks I just recently learned about. So like, should we go about learning that, or it won't really help in the context of what we got to do?
More the latter. There are certainly more hooks built into React. Use callback and use ref are two that I have used, but only in very advanced React situations. We did actually use another hook that was not built into React. Do you remember what it was? Anyone?
When was this?
In blog project.
Use navigate.
Oh, okay. Yes, that is another hook, but not the hook I was thinking of. We've used two hooks. Use navigate is one, and use params is another. Use params is a hook that the router provides in order for us to get some information out, right? So you can think about a hook as just hooking into some functionality either built directly into React or built into another package, or we can actually write our own hooks. I have written my own hook. I've probably written 5 hooks in the 6 years that I've written React code, 5 years, however long it's been. So I didn't think they were worth including in the curriculum. Hooks are kind of a tricky concept, but also an important one, because use state and use effect are obviously very important to React code. So I would say if you're feeling confident in React and you can rattle off 10 React concepts in your head and off the top of your head and write some code as an example of how to use them, at that point, I would say, sure, go ahead and spend more time looking into those hooks. But I find the best way to learn is to wait until you need it and then learn it then. So personally, I wouldn't be going into those other hooks, but it's not like dangerous for you to go in and learn more about that.
All right, I'll just focus on it too, since project's gonna be built around it.
Yes. I picked the 2 that are most important and the 2 that I use every single day that I write React code. That's not to say that the other ones aren't important or don't get used. It's just that they don't get used as frequently.
Also, would you be able to cover on how we can transfer, or if there's a way, or if it's already done, transfer CSS from one component and then take the CSS from that component to another page? Is that we'll talk about it tomorrow more.
Yeah, remind me that after I do the React review.
Okay.
The basic answer is that you make a CSS file, that the SCSS file that we did tonight, where like you scope it all by the ID. And then you just do a comma after the ID at the first line in the CSS file and put in whatever ID you want to use on the other component.
Okay. Okay, cool.
But remind me of that tomorrow. That will make more sense to see it visually than it is for me to explain it.
Sure. Thank you.
Cool. Looks like you guys want another open office hours day, so that is totally fine. We can hang out tomorrow. There will not be a ton more of these to take advantage of until we get to that very last week, right? That very last week in class is all about practicing your presentations, which is way too early to start panicking about now. It is also for capstone, right? It's just open office hours for the last week of getting things up to the shape that you want them to be in. I will say, as an instructor who has taught in all 4 cohorts, you guys are the furthest along than any other cohort, which is a very promising sign. Even though the pacing of our classes is pretty similar, going all the way back to the first cohort. I think the capstone check-ins are a good motivator for you guys to say, all right, hold on, where are we at? How am I practicing these concepts? With all of that said, I will be a very disappointed parent or boss or whoever you would like to insert into that situation if you prove me wrong on Monday. So make sure you're focusing in on that. There are one-on-ones available tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So if you're panicking about your capstone, it's much better to panic in advance of a capstone review and just schedule a one-on-one with me. We can get you jump started, or if you're stuck somewhere, there's nothing more frustrated than being stuck. So that's why those one-on-ones are available, not just with me, but Caitlin and Karen and Ariel and Ryan and Nathan. They all know React. They all know full stack. They all know routing. They all know CSS, right? So if you don't want to meet with me, meet with one of the other TAs, right? They've all been through the program. They can all help you out. Same for Mel and whoever else I forgot to mention who's already TA'd. Jennifer, go ahead.
Hi. Do you have a few minutes after class?
Sure do.
Thanks.
Any other questions for tonight? Cool. Have a great evening, everyone. Keep up the work on your capstones, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Jennifer, I'm going to put us in a breakout room.
Okay.